The naval webtoon Castle is up there with one of my favorite anything ever, regardless of format or genre. I've discussed it at length, and at this point I don't think I need to intro the series or ease anyone into it. If you watch my channel, you know what it is. Castle has almost always delivered on its potential, over-delivered on it. It's a series with some of the highest highs I've ever seen, but it's not without its shortcomings, some of which, especially recent ones, are quite concerning, on the level beyond just simple writing mishaps. They feel like they reflect something going on in the boardrooms, the naval offices, wherever Castle is being churned out from. And this has never been more apparent than currently, where pretty much for the first time in the manhwa's lifespan, a lot of fans are worried, especially domestically in South Korea. So what's going on? As of recording, the most recent Castle 2 chapter released is chapter 92, which came out on March 19, meaning the manhwa has been on hiatus for over 3 months now, with a return date set in early July. Hiatuses, even long ones, aren't uncommon for Castle, so this isn't new, but this time the hiatus was extended 2 times. The initial notice cited late May as a tentative return window, but then it was delayed to late June, with author Jonghyun saying that, and I quote, he will absolutely keep his promise this time, before going on to break it and extend it to July. So this pissed off some fans, especially because author Jonghyun often goes ghost on his readers during long breaks. He did this after the end of part 1, and for a while there was no word on when part 2 was gonna come out. And Castle 2 has also already had its first long hiatus after chapter 38, and fans had no communication with Jonghyun back then too for the better part of the hiatus. And this time, while he has maintained communication, using the word absolutely and not delivering on it rubbed a lot of fans the wrong way. But I think when it comes to famous artists or celebrities going ghost and the professionalism demanded of them, international fans are a lot more charitable compared to places like East Asia. And this is still not the real problem that the manhwa is facing, or the real topic of this video. The real problem is kinda subtle, but it has been brewing in front of our faces, and there is a specific word in Jonghyun's post that blew the lid for most people. As the reasoning for the additional 2-week delay, he said something along the lines of, the manuscript that we prepared left a lot to be desired, or simply just not good enough. So even if it's at the cost of another delay, we'd like to try and salvage it and come up with something better. Jonghyun's tone doesn't exactly inspire optimism, and there are a few reasons why this is particularly concerning. So to really explain everything, I have to fill you in on some background info. So Castle fans like to talk about the series like it's this close to perfect fiction, right? I'm guilty of this too. I mean, after all, it does have some of the highest highs that I've ever seen in any genre. But part 2 for some time now has had some legitimately shaky moments in pacing, character writing, and power scaling. I usually don't care about power scaling if it serves the plot, but when it feels unnecessary, it can be an issue. Before the release of Castle 2, Castle was acquired by a publishing company, Pak Taejun, or PTJ Comics as known to international fans. PTJ is home to some of the biggest webtoons to ever exist, like Lookism. Now, full disclosure, I don't really read anything they put out besides Castle, so I don't know everything about them, but if I'm not wrong, a lot of webtoons under PTJ also share the same universe. Simply put, they're like the Marvel of webtoons, and their output is rapid and massive. This whole blueprint of like, he was bullied in high school and he came back as a badass kind of YouTube thumbnail stuff that you've most likely seen, and the reason that the entire medium of webtoons is generally associated with this kind of stuff, the powerhouse that is PTJ is responsible for this. And this move was not welcome news to Castle fans. The general sentiment of Castle fans towards PTJ is pretty hostile. People don't want their footprint on Castle. And to be fair to PTJ, it's not like Castle became slop overnight or something. Part 2 has still been pretty good all around. But in small but significant parts, the unease around the series' new direction has still persisted, and for good reason. Again, I don't really know that much about PTJ or how they operate on an in-depth granular level, but on a Reddit post of 2 years ago on the Lookism sub, as people were discussing Castle officially joining the roster, one commenter had this to say, "Minus the spin-off being about Gap, 2 years later this comment has aged pretty well, terrifyingly well." So Castle has several subtitles besides just the word castle. The first part was Nangong Bulak, which translates to impenetrable. This is obviously a reference to how an early Gimshin took the fight to Castle, a seemingly invincible group. The second part is Owol Dongju. This title was dropped at the end of part 1, as Gimshin joined Castle but with an obvious ulterior motive to just destroy it from within. And this translates to bitter alliance, or more directly, bitter enemies on the same ship. It's a historical idiom referring to some ancient warring Chinese states that were forced to coexist, a perfect parallel to Gimshin and Castle's alliance. The third would be Man in Jisang, which translates to one above all, one above 10,000, or simply pinnacle. So this means that Castle is a trilogy, but only it's not. We all know that part 2 is the final part, and is already called Pinnacle, so the planned Bitter Alliance part was just erased. Either that or the two were just merged. To look at this and just immediately jump to the conclusion that PTJ is behind this could be a bit short-sighted. But the state of the manhwa does make it pretty suspicious. It's simply too rushed. Gimshin joins Castle, promising to help Choi Min-wook tie up some loose ends, so that he can create his perfect untouchable castle, and Choi Min-wook, knowing there's more to this, still accept the offer. This gave us some really good scenes with a lot of tension, where Becky and Castle had to work together, but you can tell that both teams want to backstab the other. But then strangely, this plot point just comes to a dead stop, and Gimshin goes on a total of one measly mission, officially as part of Castle. Because he just outright ambushes Choi Min-wook by chapter 50, ending the alliance and kicking off the final portion of the story. The stunt that Gimshin pulled at chapter 50 caused Choi Min-wook a lot of trouble, and since then it's just been multiple failed attempts to get rid of Gimshin, which makes the seemingly untouchable Choi Min-wook look like an idiot. You took this guy in, knowing he wants to kill you, because why not, right? You're just playing with him, you're untouchable, and you could use some of his help. But that barely happened, and now you're engaged in a full-blown war with him, where it could legitimately go either way, and it's not looking too good for your team. Min-wook literally just could have killed Gimshin at the end of part 1, but we were given no real reason why he didn't. At some point, Choi Min-wook is gonna have to start being a real character, not just an overcooked archetype. The mob boss who whispers a lot of cryptic stuff, never breaks a sweat, he probably likes art, etc. It's unfortunate that one of the most important characters in all of Castle feels a bit lazy. This supports the theory that the Bitter Alliance part was just condensed into like a third of its original planned size for some unknown reason. And the story and the characters ultimately have to suffer as a result of the insane pacing. The pacing issues have a trickle-down effect on almost every character, and I'll go through them one by one. Yoo Woosung and Hwajin. It's a personal belief of mine that Yoo Woosung would have been the main part 2 villain had it not been shortened. Now don't get me wrong, Yoo Woosung was a great character who also had a great exit from the story, and they even came up with a pretty good in-canon reason for why he got so emotional at the end and how that led to his own demise. I've made a whole separate Yoo Woosung video if you're interested. But the issue is that Yoo Woosung Hwajin group just got swept. Lee Chan, Ling Ling, Do Chen, and Yoo Woosung himself all died like 5 chapters apart from one another. It's like Jong Yong just wanted to get it out of the way, and it's especially puzzling because initially it seems like they're going to flesh out the dynamics more. For example, there was a lot of tension between Lee Chen and Ling Ling. Ling Ling's character bio makes mention of an event where her assassin clan was slaughtered by someone, and she was the sole survivor. And Lee Chan's past seems oddly related to this incident. There was a lot to explore there, but before they had the chance, both of them got bodied by Gimshin. And strangely, this kind of occurrences don't end with these two. The exact same thing happened to Gustav, who was introduced in part 1 as your typical crazy fighting junkie kind of character. He loves the thrill of the hunt, and Gimshin is his personal target. Even the alliances he picks are merely to serve this purpose, of fighting a full-power serious Gimshin. But at some point he started having doubts towards the own company that he was keeping, because number 1, his teammates were just so slimy, and number 2, he was particularly moved by how honorable Akira fought. He was becoming quite disillusioned with the new Isekura, and there was conflict in Gustav's eyes when Akira died, as if he had picked the wrong team. They also expanded on this plot point by having Iwashiro, the Yakuza head, tell Lisa that her soldiers might not all the way be loyal to her. This was a genuinely interesting angle to take with Gustav's character, and give him real development, but again, before this could be further explored or reach a satisfying conclusion, Shin just simply kills Gustav. I mean, I get it. It's hard to flesh out these various dynamics. It's easier to just undercut them in favor of top 10 most OP MC aura moments, especially because the average Webtoon reader prefers the latter anyways. But it's frustrating, because I expect Castle to do the hard route. I don't expect anything from other Webtoons, but I expect Castle to maintain its standards that have separated itself from the rest. And it's not like Jongyang forgot those plot points or anything. Before Li Chen died, we got another flashback with Ling Ling berating him. And before Gustav died, he was seeing visions of Aquila. It's either that Jongyang wants to do more with these characters, but he has to answer to someone else that's insisting on the hype and aura writing, or that he also doesn't know how to unpack these characters and deal with the ever-growing cast, so he simply just feeds them to Shin in bulk. But by doing this, you pigeonhole yourself into predictable outcomes. Side character versus side character fights are often very enjoyable, maybe even more so than the protagonist fights. I mean, Gustav could have switched teams and fought Corolla. It's a more interesting matchup for both of them, and it takes some off of Shin's plate. They're writing themselves into a corner with relentless Shin aura moments, because the more people he runs through, the harder it is to write a believable opponent for him. I'll get into that more later in this video. The point I'm making is that as much as this webtoon means to me, Castle is not immune to hype moments and aura and ridiculous power scaling tendencies, and this wasn't the case just in season 1. As a segue into my next point, I've always felt a bit icky about the Shin wins LOL, but I think I was in the minority with this up until recently, but other people are starting to feel the same way now. So the two final fights of Castle 2 are 1. Shin vs Mahagyeong, the bodyguard of Choi Min-wook, and number 2, Shin vs the mystery prologue character, who has now been revealed as the deuteragonist P. Ujin, that has become quite disillusioned with Shin's ways. At the time, I thought this prologue was quite cool, the mysterious silhouettes and everything, but the more time passes, the more I question if this was really necessary, because this already kind of screws Mahagyeong, meaning that he won't be the final fight, and already projecting the outcome that he'll lose. But now it's not only that he'll lose to a Shin that has scored a hat-trick, killing Gustav, Ma Junyoung, and Corolla, leaving only Mahagyeong and Shinken. And if that wasn't enough, he's gonna lose to a Shin that is still going to have enough stamina left to take on P. Ujin after beating him. It's possible that Jongyang will figure something out, but at the moment, the Mahagyeong and P. Ujin battles feel extremely tacky, because Jongyang has written himself into a corner. And the fan seems to believe that when Jongyang said they can't figure out a good, competent manuscript, he's most likely referring to a satisfying conclusion for these two fights. And because the plot moves so fast, from Hwajin to immediately the final fight, this is a Shin that has been fighting back to back with injuries from season 1. We're getting dangerously close to that overpowered MC Manhwa slop that Castle used to be so distinguished from. To be fair, Castle does the strong protagonist trope better than his contemporaries, because you get to see people become fed up with the fact that Shin has no consideration for people on his own team that aren't as strong as him, and that's pretty compelling drama. But two things can be true at the same time. He's getting so absurdly strong that it's hard to write believable fights with him. Next up, Ryu Jihak. Ryu Jihak is another fan favorite character. He serves the company Hasong. They take Shin's side in the final war. They were also a trump card that Shin laid during the Hwajin fight, and Ryu had to hold Mahagyeong and his team back. He took quite the beating there and narrowly escaped with his life, being saved by his former enemy Choi Dal-chan, who betrayed Castle. Another Choi Min-wook is an idiot moment. When Jihak woke up, his employer Kim Tae-hoon is fighting for his life at the Hasong headquarters, so he had to rush to the scene with painkillers. And this is the kicker. In that state, he took on Jongdan, Choi Min-wook's third strongest fighter, and his entire team, a few Russian killers, and even Sasaki Shinken, who he did eventually lose against, but again, this lineup is just absurd. This was by far the lowest rated point of Castle 2. Castle has a lot of characters that even a trilogy would be just enough for, but now they have to die like flies to accommodate the pace. The saving grace of this fight was that Ryu had one of the best death scenes I have ever seen. It was beautiful. The art was great, and it was loaded with thematic and character depth. This is a consistent theme with Jongyang, where Castle 2 will have a shaky moment, and then he'll clutch with like the greatest chapter you've ever read. But you can't not acknowledge the dull moments because of that. Next up we have the Fingers. Chon Il-do is someone that long before Kim Shin's time was the king of the underworld, and back then, Choi Min-wook was the rising new hero. Min-wook defeated Il-do alongside his guys, but then partnered up with Il-do and betrayed his people, and this is how Castle came to be. But now, Il-do in turn betrayed Min-wook and partnered up with Kim Shin. Basically, this guy is someone who will slime anyone to ensure his survival, and he has his own group of soldiers, Judo and the Fingers. The Fingers are some pretty bizarre body horror kind of characters that almost come across as supernatural. There's a Castle spin-off called High Class that seems to be telling the story of how these Fingers came to be. But the problem is, in Castle, we have not seen them at all. They were teased at the end of part 1, and we know what the main guy looks like, but not the rest. We haven't seen them not once, and it's the final fight already, so what's going on? Are they gonna be used as fodder for Mahagyeom? Is there gonna be another arc dedicated to them? Nobody knows. But there's no room left to effectively tell the story, and this is quite concerning. And lastly, I have to address the spin-offs. Last year, 2 Castle spin-offs were announced, named Gurion and High Class. One is a prequel about Seo Jin-tae, Kim Shin's right-hand man, and one about the Fingers and Chon Il-do. When Gurion was initially announced, people were excited, but then it was revealed that it would be illustrated by someone else and not Jongyang. And once it came out, the tone, the writing, and the aesthetics were unrecognizably bad. Nothing about it screamed Castle, and everything about it screamed your typical PTJ manhwa. High Class is relatively better, but nonetheless still don't feel like Castle. I say all this to say that 2 years after the move to PTJ, Castle, while still great and more than serviceable, has become less and less immune to genre conventions. And this could very well be confirmation bias, but nowadays it feels like it's busy trying to fight off its own PTJ influence like the Black Suit symbiote. And Jongyang's recent behavior, while not a big deal for international fans, has unfortunately fanned the flame for the more anxious and less charitable audience. I guess when we see the return of the series next week, and once Kim Shin vs Mahagyeom and Kim Shin vs Pi Woo-jin are both in the rear view, we will have our confirmation on whether or not the creative team is spinning the wheels on the story. But until then, it's been Edward Takeshi, thanks for watching, and peace.